Welcome to Elevate Louisiana Engage podcast. Elevate Louisiana was founded earlier this year to empower women leaders throughout Louisiana by connecting and educating them on the challenges impacting our state with data-driven, nonpartisan solutions to make a better future for Louisiana. Hello, I'm your host, Julie Stokes. Today, we are recording the final episode in a four-part series on the state of education in Louisiana. These four videocasts are a prologue to an interactive webinar on September 25th between the members of Elevate Louisiana and the speakers that have appeared on our education series. Elevate September 25th webinar will be a forum where our members will discuss Louisiana's education policies with the policy makers themselves so that our civic leaders can get more engaged in building a better future for our state. Our guest today is Dr. Cade Brumley, Louisiana's brand new State Superintendent of Education. He began his tenure in June of 2020. Dr. Brumley, like myself, actually, is a product of public education. He is from Sabine Parish, where he attended all of his schools, then receiving his bachelor's degree from Northwestern State University in Natchitoches. Again, because we've had this recurrent theme, fork 'em demons, sorry. His master's degree from LSU and his doctoral degree from Stephen F. Austin State University in Nacogdoches, Texas. He's invested his entire adult life to improving the lives of Louisiana's children. He served as a teacher, coach, assistant principal, district leader, and superintendent, both in Jefferson Parish schools, the largest school system in the state with more than 51,000 students, and also the home of yours truly. I went to Jefferson Parish Public Schools my entire life. And then he was also superintendent in DeSoto Parish in Northwest Louisiana before he came to us in Jefferson. So welcome, Dr. Brumley.
Oh, thanks for having me, Julie. I look forward to the conversation.
My first question is asked with great pride in all that you've accomplished to get to this point. As a lifelong Louisiana educator, what does it mean to you to be state superintendent?
Well, it's an incredible honor. Certainly right now, dealing with the challenges that we face in Louisiana educationally on any given day, but then with COVID and with hurricane, there are increased efforts that we must undertake in order to be successful for our kids. But for me, this is something that is a true blessing. As a first grader, I shared with my classroom teacher that I wanted to be a school principal whenever I grew up. And so I was able to prepare myself for that work, where I eventually became a school principal after serving as a teacher and a coach, and then went on into the role of a district superintendent, and then now here as state superintendent with the opportunity to serve, students and educators and families and communities from throughout the state. And I feel the weight on my shoulders, and I think that you want me to feel the weight on my shoulders because you know that we have to get better for kids and we have to get better for our communities. And so, this isn't just a 9-to-5 job for me. This is something that I do not disconnect from, and I absolutely want to see us get better outcomes for our kids and provide more opportunities for our kids because it's just so vitally important, not just for the student, but for their future. It's important for our economy. It's important for employment, the economy, healthcare, so many reasons. And so that's why I'm excited about the role.
Yeah. How has your experience as an educator aided you in this transition to this big new role?
Well, I think that I'm, certainly have things that I need to learn, like all of us do. And I recognize that I'm not fully there yet in terms of being who I ultimately need to be. But I do think I am uniquely positioned just from the perspective of having served all of the different roles of an educator and also having led systems both in the northern part of the state and a smaller rural/suburban district, but then also in South Louisiana in the largest school system in the state in a very urban setting. So, I can work across the state with all different types of groups and understand their challenges, understand their successes because I've been there.
Yeah. And I know public education and just the environment, like Jefferson was always a suburban, but I think it is becoming increasingly urban. I think the lines between Jefferson and Orleans are very much going away, in my opinion, and just how much diversity you have in school, which is, I think, a blessing.
Well,
How's
Jefferson in particular, I've had this conversation with a number of people who tend to believe Jefferson is a suburban system. Well, it's really not. It's not anymore. It's a very urban system. I've had individuals tell me that Jefferson Parish Schools is basically New York City public schools in Louisiana, because any ethnicity that exists in our state, we have it. Every religion, we have it. Every view, philosophy, belief, we had it in Jefferson Parish
yeah.
public schools, and that's what made it, frankly, so exciting every single day. And it just had an international flair to it as well. And so helping students in that school and helping those teachers was really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. So, how's your experience as an educator really influence your vision for the Louisiana Department of Education?
Well, for one, I know some of the things that I think we really have to tackle. We really have to continue to invest in early childhood education, not just from a quantity standpoint, but quality seat standpoint, because our kids come to us so far behind. Over 50% of the kids come to school not kindergarten ready, and schools go into catch-up mode. If you're talking about impoverished communities, that number is often 90% of kids who are coming to school not kindergarten ready, can't count to 10, don't know their letters. It's just so unfortunate. So we have to invest there. I know that we have to make sure that kids are reading on grade level by the end of third grade. If they're not proficient by the end of third grade, they're 2 or 3 times more likely to be a high school dropout. We know that 80% of people in American prisons today don't have a high school diploma. And so then you track kids all the way through from third grade all the way to high school. We need to make sure that we're elevating career and technical education in a way that hasn't been done before, because it's been diminished. We've told people that they're lesser than if they don't have a college degree, and that's just not true. And so we need to make sure that we're elevating those trades crafts, and at the same time, college dual enrollment in our high schools to make sure that we're getting our kids into colleges. So I know the challenges that our schools are facing, and I know the areas where we need to improve. And so we need to make sure that we're working as a department with our state board and with the legislature to craft policies and practices that address those issues.
Yeah, well, and you hit on a couple of things that are big issues for us in Elevate and things that we want to help with. We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
Before we move on, I'm kind of curious about how school and reopening is going, with COVID and everything that we're facing. As a parent, one of the first things I think is, oh, yeah, kids might have less trouble clearing the virus. Kids don't get as sick generally, but almost every kid, it's funny how this works, goes home and lives with adults. So I'm just kind of curious, how's it going with that?
Yeah, that is usually best when there's an adult at home. We tend to find more success for the kid when that happens. Look, we have been working on this since the beginning, to make sure that we could safely reopen our schools. I have been a proponent, an outspoken proponent of having school, in some way having school. We have 800,000 students in our state in traditional public charter, or non-public, and they need to be in school in some form. And so we work with Louisiana Department of Health, we work with Ochsner, we work with Children's Hospital, and we crafted some of the best standards and resources and tools that you'll find anywhere in this nation for our schools and our systems to be able to use to safely reopen their schools. We have COVID in our communities. And so because of that, we're going to have COVID in our schools at times. And that's why the processes that we have in place to deal with that are also important. I've explained this a few times like a plane making a cross-country flight. And so if the school year is like a flight from New York to Los Angeles, we're going to get there. But we may have to take that plane down in Cincinnati and Omaha and Denver along the way for a week or two, just to regroup. And that has happened. We have successfully reopened our schools, but at times we've had to, put a class on quarantine or put a school on quarantine but that doesn't mean that we stop education for the masses. We respond as we need to respond.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm part of that's part of, what I think about all the time. It's so have you found many occurrences where you've had to put a class? I mean, how often does that happen when a class has to go on quarantine? And then my point about the parents is that, they go home to their parents, and is this crossing from the kids to the parents and then into the workplaces?
Well, we have really strong standards in place for our schools around physical distancing, group size, number of kids that can be on a school bus, face coverings, disinfecting, just a host of things. We have temperature checks, symptom monitoring. We have all of that in place, but there are still occasions where we have to respond, and we are doing that. Whether it's a classroom, whether it's a group of students, whether it's a school, we're responding. But we're keeping the educational system moving forward as we have to make those responses.
So, what kind of support has the department developed for educators and families as they work through this truly unusual year?
Yeah, so at louisianabelieves.com, you can go to our Strong Start page, and we have a ton of resources. We have tried to think about what do school leaders and what do school teachers need in order to be successful right now, and we have loaded our website with that information. Specifically to parents, I want to call out, we put forward best practices in virtual instruction. A couple of months ago, I asked every school system to stand up an online school system because some parents would not feel comfortable sending their kid to a brick and mortar building. I wanted every single parent to have the opportunity to do virtual instruction. And so they did that. Those will get better. We've taught the same way for a few thousand years, and now we've switched to virtual over a few months. So it's going to take some time to perfect that, but we're working through that. But we also crafted best practices in virtual instruction so that it's not the Wild West out there with what does virtual instruction look like. And to your point about parents, we also built a parent companion guide, and the parent companion guide on our website tells parents, what should virtual instruction look like from my school? How can I help my kid be successful? And I think it's important with the parent and the child relationship, but I also think it's important in the parent holding the school accountable for doing the job that they need to be doing. And they're able to push back when they see something that's exactly not the way it maybe should be.
Yeah, and I mean that's one of the hard things. My kids. I mean, I'm very lucky that I've got a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old at this point, and I'm not trying to work my whatever I have right now, which I'm pretty sure like 1.9 jobs, and being a parent and being a teaching parent at the same time. I know that's hard for a lot of parents, and some parents are much better equipped for it than others. Um, and so I'm glad to hear that you're sending resources back home. And hopefully some really clear resources that can help the parents know what to do and know who they need to call if something's not quite going right.
Well, the best thing is that local relationship between that parent and that teacher, or that parent and that principal, or then that parent and that system. I tend to believe that you correct problems at the local level the easiest whenever you have those relationships. And so we're trying to encourage a ton of communication from our systems and schools to their parents and their employees and all that, because I think a lack of communication builds distrust and it builds confusion. So as clear as schools can be, the better off they'll be.
Yeah, then it would be a lot simpler than it was in the spring when it was sudden and, we didn't have time to really think about how we were going to handle it.
I think that we have learned a lot over a few months.
Yeah.
Schools were not ready in the spring for a global pandemic to hit. And I think that schools received a lot of grace because of that, and rightfully so. They were given some freedoms, but, having 4 or 5 months to prepare, people are in a much better place right now to deliver remote instruction than they were before. But as of today, we still have 1 in 4 Louisiana students that do not have both a device and connectivity. So even if we have to move to a fully remote setting, 25% of our kids are still logged out, because either they don't have the device or they don't have the connectivity. And the device part is much easier than the connectivity piece. We can get a Chromebook or a laptop. We're scaling that up. I think we'll be 1-to-1 before the end of the school year, frankly. but connectivity and broadband access, especially in our rural areas, is certainly more of a challenge.
Yeah, and I think, a couple of the things that I know elevates through these video casts and through our conversations been very passionate about is early education, which we've touched on, and also this broadband divide. I think that that's going to be really important for us to bridge. How has the Department of Education worked with the systems to try to close that divide?
Well, in April, I think we had just over 60% of the students in Louisiana had internet access. And so now we're at 75. So, we've connected somewhere between 50 and 100,000 kids just over a couple of months, but that's expensive and that's not sustainable. So we're going to need long-term solutions, especially in our rural areas and especially in our more impoverished communities, because that digital divide does exist. And studies are coming out more and more that are showing that digital divide exists with students who need it to not exist the most. The ones who need the connectivity the most oftentimes are the ones who aren't connected. And so systems cannot continue to pay for every child to have internet service who doesn't have that without rethinking what funding might look like for internet, or even more importantly, thinking through how do we ensure that every corner of the state has access to the internet.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up another question that, last year when this happened, and I remember speaking to you actually about, what was our situation in Jefferson Parish, and finding out that like 50% of students didn't have access to the internet in Jefferson. And I thought, if it's like that here,
Yeah.
I mean, how bad could it be in other parts of the state? What have we done to help the kids that let's just say that you were in algebra 1 and you missed the last 10, 12 weeks of algebra 1, and now, not necessarily going in this order, but now you're in algebra 2, and how does that work? Like,
Yeah.
what do we do to bridge that divide?
So I'm a parent, I'm a dad, I have school kids, just like you. And, I think that this hits really hard for students who are on a block schedule. So like they were on a semester, so like a January to May schedule, and they lost half their year, whether it was U.S. history or geometry or whatever, they lost half a year. So as they come back, teachers are having to make assessments of where the kids are and are making adjustments. One of the things that we asked all of our systems to do is within the first 30 days of their opening to conduct an assessment in literacy and math. And you think about, like, we're all familiar with LEAP test. So think about LEAP test, but then think about that being able to happen in about 30 minutes or less. And so that's what we've asked systems to do, so that we at least get an idea of what has been the impact of 5 months without school. What are our reading levels across the state? What are our math levels across the state? And if we have that information, and we'll soon have that information, it'll help us make policy decisions. It'll help us make resource allocation decisions. But we can't make decisions without that data. And I tend to believe that we're going to see significant learning loss from those 5 months. I have always been very concerned about the summer learning loss and kids being out of school for 2 months, especially I go to impoverished communities again, and how schools have to go into makeup session whenever schools come back from the summer. And that's why I'm an advocate for a balanced calendar. I think that we take our number of days and we balance it across this entire year, and we don't have that significant delay or gap of instruction for over 2 months every summer.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea too, because I've always wanted to go see the fall leave change, and, and I've never been able to. So not one time since my kids got in school. So I
Julie,
think
too,
blocking out.
on that point, for many middle income or upper middle income or even lower income or even working families, this may not be a problem for their children, because those children have experiences in some way during the summer. They have experiences, they have conversation, they have enrichment and enhancement opportunities during the summer that keep them on track. But for students who don't have those experiences, that they have a neglect or a void or an absence of those experiences for 2 months. And that has an impact emotionally, academically, socially. And I really think that as a state, we have to look at how do we close that period of time so that no longer exists.
Well, yeah, no, I agree. And like this summer in particular, I think kids that normally have enriching experiences, like going on vacations, even like the highest end of kids, spent a lot of time watching Netflix this summer. But what about summer school? Because not only did we miss the end of last school year, but there was no summer school for a catch up for kids that needed it, right?
Yeah, I mean, everything shut down, Friday the 13th in
Yeah.
March, and everything shut down. And various systems responded in the ways in which they were compelled to respond. I was pretty
Mhm.
proud of our Jefferson response, but even so, it wasn't what every child needed or deserved, but it was simply what we could stand up given the resource and time that we had to do that.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna ask two more questions, really. Well, three maybe. So, um, dual enrollment. That's one of the things that we also talk a lot about here at Elevate, and something that we believe is one of the keys, really, to having a productive a population with credentials to be able to survive and live a better life. How is all of this affecting that, and where do you see the future of that going with the school year?
I think dual enrollment is a real opportunity, and I think it has um, to much extent, it has a lot of universal support. I tend to believe that if we can connect our students in high school to a university, pair them with one of our Louisiana universities for some coursework, they're more likely to attend that university. And then research will show you that if you connect a kid with dual enrollment to a college, they're more likely to retain past year one at that college. And so I think it's a real opportunity for us to make an increased investment. And whenever I say investment in this sense, I'm not just talking about funds, I'm talking about policy, time, relationships to make those connections. So we want to do that. We want to really zero in and do this and grow our dual enrollment numbers. I think it's going to do a ton of good across the whole state. And so you'll see more from our department over the coming year on increasing dual enrollment opportunities.
Good. We're excited to hear that. So, in along the same lines of the fact that the students missed the end of last school year, there was no summer school, and now the teachers are coming back into this weird, weird universe, where we've got social distancing and masks, and it's got to be tough. What about accountability? What about all of our school grades and our teacher grades and all of this? I mean, where does that stand with this?
Yeah, at this point, we have not made any regulatory flexibilities concerning compulsory attendance, instructional minutes, or our accountability system. I think our state board recognizes, and we certainly do as an administration, that we're going to have to be nimble and adjust to circumstances as they arise. But right now, we have not made any waivers or flexibilities regarding any of those things. I tend to believe the first reason you assess is to inform instruction. So why does a teacher initially assess? They assess initially to know, okay, what does the child understand and what do they not understand, and then how do I respond instructionally? So beyond that, we've moved to a place where instruction now informs the public about the quality of their schools, which is also important. So I'm hopeful that we can have that cycle again in the spring, although we may have to make some level of provision or considerations on how that happens. I don't know. We're in COVID time is a different time zone. And so even the things that we're talking about today, Julie, like tomorrow, something could happen. And if we have the conversation 3 days from now, I could be changing my thoughts and my beliefs because of where we are. But as of today, that's where we are.
Well, that's no lie. Yeah. So, I guess one of the things that I really want to draw out here is, what are the priorities of the Department of Education moving forward? What can groups that are in civic engagement, leaders around the state, what can we help get the word out for you? What can we help to do, in terms of talking to our legislators? What are your focuses, and what can we do to help?
Yeah, I appreciated you letting me lay some of that out earlier, but it's really, I think, priority early childhood education makes a ton of a difference. I think literacy, really focusing on literacy in concert with early childhood education, marrying those two things together and increasing those literacy rates by third grade, elevating career and technical education, making sure that we have more students who are leaving high school ready for a good job, not just a credential that may not do anything for them, but a leaving school with the ability to actually have a real high wage job, and then the dual enrollment connections with the universities. I think in terms of opportunities, those are some of the most significant where we need to lean in. Of course, we want to do a ton of stuff around the teacher pool, increasing the teacher pool, increasing the quality of the teachers, increasing teacher voice, the same with leadership. Um, a ton of stuff around all of that, but just brass tacks, I think those are some of our key endeavors that we'll be working on over the next year.
Yeah, well, that's about what I would have expected, actually. So that's a perfect answer. That's about all the time we have for today. But I'd really like to thank you, our state school superintendent, Cade Brumley, for joining us today. We very much look forward to spending more time with you on September 25th when we really talk about our needs and what we can do to help. For those of you that are listening, if you're interested in joining Elevate Louisiana and want to be part of the larger interactive webinar on September 25th, please contact us through social media on Facebook at Elevate LA, at ELLEVATELA, or by visiting our website at same thing, ELLEVATELA.org. You can also visit us there if you're interested in membership in Elevate Louisiana. And finally, don't forget to like Elevate on all of your social media platforms and share this video cast on your page if you found it interesting. I'm your host, Julie Stokes, and we'll see you next time.